I want to build a little bit on what Brian was saying earlier. First of all, he made some very good points, and he talked about how to go about getting people into office. You know, the kind of people who are going to be, I love this phrase, progressives in reverse. Because quite frankly, I am sick to death of progressives. Progressives have made more messes that we have to run around trying to stomp out since Trudeau than I think in the previous 2,000 years of human history. I'm being a little bit over the top, but the point is, when you look at, we have all these spot fires. We have assaults on property rights. We have assaults on language rights. The whole reason this group exists in the first place is to rectify a problem that Pierre Trudeau and his charter and all those kind of things and his attitudes, his gift to the country, if you will, caused. So now we have people who had never otherwise been at odds with each other, fighting each other tooth and nail over something as basic and as simple as language. Okay, so we have that. You have, in any culture, there are people who learn to get along with each other, or they'll sort it out, they'll knock heads, and eventually the dust settles and they learn to get along. That's the human condition. This is forced and it's artificial. So, okay, so how do we do this? Well, the first thing you have to figure out, I think that one of the most important things is to define real leaders, or real leadership. What is it? Because Brian is saying we got to elect good people. Well, how do you know when you're talking to somebody who is a good people? When you look back through history at some of the great leaders, okay, whether it's Caesar Augustus, whether it's Winston Churchill, whether it's Diefenbaker, MacDonald, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher.
Laurier.
Fine. Well, Laurier, MacDonald, you pick whoever it is. But the point is they all bear several things in common. They had an attitude that their word was their bond. It wasn't all that long ago in the human experience that when you bought or sold land, it was done with a handshake and a little piece of dirt transferred between the two parties, and that was all that was required. You didn't need to have long contracts where everybody knew exactly what the responsibilities of the other person were. That's the root of common law. Liz will talk a little more about that, I'm sure, when she gets up here in about 2 days. You think I'm kidding? Anyway, I am, believe me, I am. But the point I want to make is that in real leadership, they have this idea that your word is your bond. So when you want to see that attitude reflected in your politicians, the very first thing you have to do is have that attitude yourself. You have to, when you give your word that you will be somewhere, or you want someone to be on time, you better be there on time too. You have to have the qualities. If you take a look at Canadian values, what are they? Honesty, integrity, a sense of fair play, a sense of your word is your bond, the idea of self-sacrifice, putting others before yourself. These are the values that built the country. And they're across the board from every race and creed and color that ever came to this country and called it home and worked to build it. Those are the common things that hold us together. So if we want our politicians to have those things, we better have them first. Because that's how you'll recognize somebody who is worthy of voting in office. They'll look just like us. Because we have those values that we value. Like the thing that drives me crazy is when a politician gets up and, as Brian pointed out, promises the moon. Then when they get into office, either somebody says, you know that promise you made? You can't keep it. Because you got to toe the party line. Or they find out the economics behind what they were promising are so out of whack that the only kind of person who could ever pass or promise and then fulfill it is Dalton McGuinty. Because he's got no basis in reality in the first place. Just look at the Green Energy Act. Okay, you've got all this stuff. So what happens is if you promise something, you better be ready to deliver on it. You better make sure that come hell or high water, if you promise that you're going to deliver 100 cords of wood and a pizza every Wednesday for the next 10 years to your neighbor, you'd better do it. Because the other side of that coin is if you can't do it, don't promise it. I would rather vote for a politician any day of the week who says, you know what, guys? We have had people promise you a bridge where there is no river. They'll build the bridge and dredge the river. But we didn't need the bridge. So they spent all kinds of money they didn't need to spend, and now look at the mess we're in. I'm not going to do that. The only thing I will promise is that when I am elected, if you choose to elect this individual, then you can count on me to have your interest in the front of my mind, so that when I'm doing the business of the country or the province or the township, whatever level of government they're running for, your interests will be at the front of my mind, not mine. Because it's public service, not public service. And that is how we will make the changes that Brian's talking about. But we first have to instill them back within ourselves, within our children. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir. That the people, you're here because you believe these things. Otherwise, you'd be laying on the couch listening to Nick at Night reruns. Well, maybe not. But the point I'm making is you wouldn't have gotten up early to come from wherever it is you came from Marmora, or from down in central Ontario, or from, you know, this corner of the world, wherever you came from to get here. You care about your country, you love it, that's why you're here. But you have to take that message and apply it. You need to go to these meetings that Brian's talking about, the meetings where you select the candidates, and you need to grill them really hard. That selection process should be the most difficult thing any prospective politician ever goes through. Because if we can make it so rough on them, and I'm saying this with all due respect, okay, I don't want to crucify people, but I want to know who we're voting for. So if you want to, no question should be off the board. If somebody gets up and they ask the representative candidate, how do you feel about abortion? How do you feel about pro-life? How do you feel about family values? How do you feel about this particular aspect of economics? And then watch their reaction. It's their body language you're watching for, not what they say. Do they start doing this and go, well, I see your point, but then again, no, that kind of thing is a jellyfish. We got enough of those. But you want somebody to stand up, even if you don't like the answer, but is willing to stand up and look you in the eye and say, this is what I believe in. Because then at least you know, if he's gone through that or she's gone through that process, when they get to Queen's Park, there's nothing they can do to them that's going to be worse than what happened at the selection committee meeting, or however that process is done. So that's the winnowing that needs to go on with candidates. And until and unless that happens, not much else is going to change. We had a municipal election just a little while ago, and we elected a whole bunch of new councillors and a new mayor. And you know what? Things are worse. Why? Because we didn't change the philosophy. We didn't change the ideology, we changed the nameplates. You got rid of one set of progressives and we threw another bunch in. Well, surprise! Now we got a guy in the back of the room with 17,280 condoms. Yeah, that's a good priority. You know, just speak on that quickly. If people want that kind of stuff, they can go buy their own. You know, we don't need to have the city telling us how to do what God taught us to do long before we were ever born. We don't need Jim Watson holding our hand from cradle to grave. For that kind of stuff, I'll stay with the church. They're a lot smarter about it than Jim Watson will ever be. But the bottom line I'm trying to get across, folks, and I'll wrap up with this, is if we really want to make changes at any level of government, we must elect people who have the values of self-sacrifice, fairness, honesty, integrity. But in order to identify those people, we have to have them ourselves. And once we do, then it'll be easy, because they'll be merely a reflection of us. Thank you.